Hi, I'm Samuel from Zoom. I'm very happy to be sitting down with Boris Krichevsky today, who is a production sound mixer who worked on the film Anora, which just won 5 Academy Awards with director Shawn Baker. It must feel really great to have worked on a film that started as an indie project, went on to film festivals, started winning awards, ended up on the biggest stage of them all and winning the biggest award there. Tell us how it's been for you to know that you've worked on this project.
It's been great, a tremendous honor and pleasure. Sean's kind of vision for these films is to really embody the indie spirit, but also like to live in the theatrical space. We shot on 35 and then it had like a run and it played on 35 in some theaters. It's really great that all the efforts are recognized and rewarded.
Were you somebody that was a film lover and got into that world, or were you an audio recording guy and you started doing that? How did you start out?
I guess a bit of both. I was never an audio guy, solely coming from like recording or engineering, but I went to film school, studied directing, but where I studied, we learned all, technical and craftsmanship aspects of film. And I ended up doing a lot of sound there in film school. And I also worked in music even before then. I mean, I made music in a band, and then eventually I started working in soundtracks and some sound design. So that's a large part of my work to this day is some post sound and a lot of composition, scoring, and such. Of course, being a production sound mixer is a great meeting point.
Do you remember the first audio recorder you were using when you were working in film?
Yeah, so the School of Visual Arts where I studied had a 702T recorder and whatever the mixer was, 302 or something like that. I don't remember the exact model numbers. But yeah, it was that bag where there's like a separate mixer and a separate recorder. And then, as I was leaving school and starting to work, I was renting a package like that or similar packages before I got my own equipment.
I went to music recording school, and one of the things I didn't appreciate at the time that I learned afterwards was that the access to the equipment that I had there, I didn't realize how sorely I was going to miss it, and the shock when you're in the real world and you're left with only your own equipment or only what you're able to rent, and trying to get the most out of that.
Yeah, I don't know if I should be saying this in terms of like I don't know if it's spilling some kind of dirty secret, but on the other hand, maybe this is helpful if any young future sound person should see this. I started working as in getting like paid sound jobs while I was still in school. So I had the luxury of actually renting the school's equipment for free to take onto sound jobs. So that was like a luxury that, I know many people wouldn't be afforded. Because, you'd just have to go to a rental house and pay the market value. So yeah, I was very lucky in that sense that I could start working while I still had access to easily available gear. I mean, there's like a little bit of red tape to jump through. You fill out some forms or whatever. It has to be available because the school doesn't have like an infinite supply of sound packages. But yeah, at the end of the day, I was really lucky to have access to that before having to like actually go about renting, spending money before I was making it basically.
How did you get involved in the Anora project?
I was working on Pet Shop Days, and I met producer Alex Coco, the very same who was accepting the Academy Award for Best Picture just recently on behalf of Anora. And it came up that I am a Russian speaker, and so that's how I originally was brought onto the project. I was actually originally signed on to Boom, and Patrick Southern was signed on to Mix, and then there was some last-minute reshuffling, and Patrick had to step away, and I ended up becoming the production mixer. But it was the combination of, my profession and also my expertise in the Russian language.
Seems like a pretty classic combination of connections, particular skill set perhaps, and the expertise to get the job done.
Yeah, there's always a bit of luck involved in getting to the right place. But yeah, my Pet Shop Days was shot by my friend Hunter, and a lot of my friends worked on that film. My friend Hunter Zimny was the DP of Pet Shop Days, and a lot of my other friends worked on that crew. So I was on that set just through friends and connections in the New York film scene, and then having met Alex there, this is how I moved on to Anora.
So let's talk about some of the challenges on set on this project, how you handled things. Start off, talk to us about handling dialogue and ambience on set.
Was quite standard in terms of how I usually work. which I think is especially rewarding now that we see this film go to these heights, of this prestige and these awards, because you always imagine these films that win all these awards to have these crazy sound rigs and, carts and crazy setups. And we didn't have that because it was, a fairly small indie film. But that's just how production worked. I mean, I was out of this bag. Occasionally the bag was on the cart, but a lot of the times the bag was hanging here. The post team definitely worked with the audio to recreate some of the spaces sonically. But yeah, Shawn was really focused on, every aspect of the film being realistic, and so we got the sound that was there.
Did you have a boom op or part-time boom op for the show?
Not for 100% of the film. I was on my own for some of it. But in the first leg of the film, I worked with Nikita Zark, and I worked with Brian Kuchek for the later days of the film. Brian and I did some double booming because we had some wide shots in. Actually, there might have been more, but the ones that I remember are the wide shots in the changing room inside the strip club. There's wide shots, and all the talent is scantily clad, so we really can't wire. So we did some double booms across, characters here, like this. Also, there's like a big mirror. If you look at those scenes, you'll see it's like a wide shot, mirror here, actor here, actor here. So yeah, a little bit of double boom required. And that's, booming in general, I think, is really fun, especially for handheld stuff where you're kind of doing some choreography, and sometimes it's improvised. Sometimes if you don't know exactly where the camera's going to go, you're doing the dance. And that's some of the most fun stuff in production sound.
So yeah, you're correct. Definitely seemed like at times difficulty finding a place where you could wire somebody up due to the clothing or lack thereof in the particular scene. Did you use plant mics in any scene to try to capture audio?
Yes, a few times, although I'm not entirely sure how much of this plant audio made it into the mix. But yes, for example, I can tell you from the early days, one that I remember correctly, and the only reason I remember is because I took extensive photographs of the plant mic setup. The first time that Annie comes over to Ivan's house, when they're in bed, I tried to cover as much as I could, so I taped lobs to like the side of the headboard for when they're over here, because it was a tricky shot to boom, and obviously they take their clothes off, so there's no wires in play for some of it. Anyway, yeah, there's a bit of plant audio in the film.
Talk to us about one of your favorite sets that you were working on and kind of the challenges that brought up.
One of the most exciting and challenging to do was obviously the big confrontation inside the house, because that was a shot that involved a lot of improvised camera choreography and even improvised, character blocking, because that big confrontation scene wasn't exactly blocked out. So, we ran it a bunch of different times, and those were days when I was by myself, so I was doing the dance with the camera, alongside the camera. Everybody's wired, but I'm mostly listening to the MKH50 and booming. We had a few days in the airfield with a parked plane. We shot inside this parked plane as if it was flying to Vegas, and there was a lot going on there. That was pretty crowded, so that was mostly wires.
Talk to us about wiring up the car, not for the dialogue, but for the car sound.
Yeah, there's a lot of car stuff in the film, which is always really fun because it's a different kind of practice in terms of production sound, because you rig up the car, you wire the actors and or the car. We tried to do everything, and then you just throw your bag in the trunk and just kind of pray that it sounds good. Sometimes sometimes we're in a follow car and I have a Comtech. Sometimes the Comtech's connected to the aux port on the car, so everyone in the van can hear it. And sometimes they just go for a drive on their own, and I don't know what's happening. And then I listen to playback later. Thankfully, yeah, never had a shot where like the audio crapped out, and I had to be the reason for a redo. I did a little bit of wild audio of the car, of the Mercedes especially, because it really has some prominent sounds. And I was really happy to learn later that a lot of that audio was used in the mix, because it's really prominent, but at the same time, very often I know that library audio gets used for car stuff, and you can even recognize it because that BBC library audio that everybody uses, it's all the same. And I believe some of it is from an old Mercedes. So it was really cool to hear and later learn that, it was the audio that we got. In the last scene, there is a wiper sound, which is very prominent. And it kind of accentuates I don't want to spoil the film, but it kind of accentuates like one of the brutal aspects of that scene. We used MKH-50s inside the car, which are, they were set for dialogue. They were pointed at characters, but at characters' faces. But the rejection on the 50s is really nice sounding, not like something, narrower where the rejection can sound really ugly. Between all of the angles that we had on the 50s and car interiors, I'm sure the post team was able to put together a really delicate and nice sounding sonic image of the interior of the car. And then, we got some wilds from the outside and some from the inside of, ambient car stuff, which was helpful in the construction of the sonic landscape, I imagine.
You were using an F8M Pro on set. Talk to us about 32-bit float and what that technology means to you when you're working on set.
First and foremost, I think it just should be the new standard, and I'm a little frustrated that we're still having debates, about its viability, because I don't think, viability or not, I'm bewildered that we're still debating because we have this newer, more comfortable area to work in, and we should just stick to it. I think it's a good place for us to be. 32 can save me from an unpredictable situation, especially on documentaries or on films where the talent is really trusted to make dramatic decisions on the fly, and someone could step on someone or someone can really explode. And it's also the unders, it's not just the overs, right? There's the really quiet stuff that you want to bring up later, which is also really valuable. As soon as the 32-bit thing was announced, I ordered it because I needed. I knew that's what would make the perfect, the heart of the bag for me, especially for the smaller and scrappier and faster moving the production. The more you need to rely on these kinds of things. In this specific use case, there was a reason why it was indispensable, is because there was a lot of stuff where I was alone and I wasn't mixing. I didn't have a surface, and I wasn't actually producing a mix. I was, it was just the ISOs getting recorded, and there were some explosive moments, obviously, in the film. And because of the nature of some scenes being kind of more improvisational than others, I wasn't always sure exactly where the audio would land. So I needed to be able to afford myself that headroom.
So we asked you to bring the rig that you were using on Anora, just because we love to check it out and see how you were working. So talk us through your rig.
Yes, this is the one. So it's in the Orca, I believe, or 30 bag. There's four 11s, and in some scenes where I needed more than that, I had 2 spare inputs, and sometimes I would reduce even. So I have 2 boom inputs here. One is for the wired that's going into 2, and the wireless is going into 1, and the wireless is on a Sennheiser G4. This is the boom receiver for the wireless boom, and that's going to 1, and this is for the boom when wired. So if I have a boom op out, the plug on is on the boom, and I'm receiving it here. And if I'm doing it myself, I'm relying on the wired connection here. And then, these are the lavs. 3, 4, 5, and 6 are these 4 that are plugged in. And during the film, sometimes I had an SRC or 2 more G3s. It really depended on, what was going on. That was basically the whole setup. And we didn't have a camera hop because it was on film. But if I do have a camera hop, I have this G3 going to the sub out. And if I need 2 different mixes, I can actually split the sub out into 2 mono outputs and send them to different transmitters and send different hops to different cameras. The main out, one of the main outs is going to this Comtech here, and that's the director's feed for this, director, script supervisor, whatever producers want to listen in, etc.
Cool. And what about power?
So glad you asked. Power is going to this. It's a little heavy, so I don't know if this is the smartest solution, but I have this really messy compartment here, and it's going to one of these. This powers the whole bag. So this D-tap goes to a Hiroshi 6-way splitter that's in here, and then out of that splitter there is power to this, power to each of these. I used to have a battery eliminator for this, but I went through several. They always broke. The wiring was always very frail, so I just decided I'm fine with AA's. It's nice to not have to deal with batteries as much as you can. And this can power this whole bag for 8 to 10 hours, depending. The frail wiring is such a hit or miss thing that I'd rather have AA's in here. And then obviously there's also power eliminator situations for this available, but I'm just using a regular 9-volt, as traditional Comtex tend to get powered. And also in the back I have I have a tentacle going into the input of this, so that way I can safely power cycle on set and not worry about drift, and then have other tentacles out for other cameras. This is also not something we had on Anora because it was on film, but for digital shoots, this is what we have. And then from the output of this, I have this, which I use to jam my slate, which is a TSC slate usually. So they have a 1/4 inch input, which makes it really easy to just jam.
And what do you use for headphones on set?
Actually, I use just these little IEMs, which are a brand called KZ, I believe. I'm not really super familiar, but I have boxes and boxes of these in case they crap out. And they actually never have, but they're so cheap that I just bought boxes and boxes anticipating that they would. Usually I split up the signal depending on the scene, but I'm used to having boom or booms in my left and lavs in my right, but also it depends on the scene. I use, the shortcuts a lot, and I have some mixes pre-saved, some headphone routings pre-saved.
And why exactly do you at times put in boom in one ear and wireless in the other?
When I'm working by myself, sometimes I'm booming and my hands are not available, so I want to hear everything, so I have to do my best, to break it up, to be able to listen to it as I'm working during the shot. Having these also, it's easy because I can kind of I can mute one, I can just yank one from my ear, then I can only hear that. And yeah, it really depends on what I need for the scene. I don't want to always listen to everything. Because oftentimes a certain mic would be only playing in certain parts of the scene. Also, having these two booms, sometimes I could have the wireless one planted somewhere and the wired one is the one I'm working with. Or I'd set up 2 wireless plants and have only the lavs in play, or more than 2 shotguns or hypocardioids playing. Really depends. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. This build is as close as I can get to a one-size-fits-all kind of ready solution.
What is it like recording audio for a film that's recording on 35 millimeter? What kind of special different workflow things come along with that?
In regards to one of the first things you do on set, it's actually easier because you don't really worry about timecode. You just jam the slate and give the slate to the camera, to the AC or the second, and that's it. You don't have to worry about jamming the cameras. Not that that's any kind of serious thing. I just jam the tentacles and hand them out to however many cameras there are. But on film, obviously, you don't need to worry about that. Sometimes we still went really far as if it was digital on Anora because there was a lot to do and a lot to explore, and it was being figured out as we were shooting. But some filmmakers just do 2 takes and that's it. They're just very conservative, and I think film really brings up that conservative filmmaking approach in some crews and some filmmakers, and there's a lot to be said for that. There's no way it should be done, but that is a way it can be done, and I think film can bring out the best practices from a crew, which is good.
So being somebody that is a production sound engineer, but also you do your own film projects, mainly in a director role, how do you find that, doing those 2 things you kind of cross the line and they are very helpful to each other and in your own personal work?
It's very helpful. Some people who work in film don't love film, and that's really incredible to me. Not a judgment or anything. I'm just really, I think, I surround myself with a lot of people who are super passionate about every aspect of film, the ideas and the technical kind of nerdy stuff. So it's really, for me, it would be difficult to imagine myself working in this if I didn't love kind of every aspect of it, if I didn't love, the dorkiest and the most esoteric aspects of the film world. But it doesn't have to be that way. It can really be whatever whatever you make of it. But yeah, sometimes it can be a challenge because in your mind you have to fight your ideas that might disagree with whatever ideas the filmmaker has. But of course, being a crew person, that's really not, you're not in a position to even express those. You keep those to yourself. Shawn on Anora, and I imagine on his other films, really invites collaboration and contribution. He talks to everyone, and he asks people, and people are welcome to offer stuff. Things are this magic of filmmaking really is happening. So there was never any kind of authoritarian kind of aspect to these sets. It was very democratic. It's his film, it's his story. He wrote it. It's his actors collaborate with him, but Not to say that people are, like swaying his vision, but people are always welcome to contribute in some way. And we were being consulted on like language and culture things, but even like little mechanical things could change. So that's always really nice.
Tell us a little bit more about working with Shawn Baker. What were some things that were different from your previous experience that you took away from working with him?
Shawn was great. It was very collaborative and very open and honest. And if anything, I think the thing that was surprising, well, I guess it wasn't surprising then, but now looking back on it, you're surprised because looks like it was a bigger movie than it really was. So back then, to me, it was just like the kind of movie that I'm used to. Everything's really nimble and everyone's really flexible, and the movie's pretty small, but to me, that's kind of how I'm used to making movies. But now looking back, Palme d'Or winner, Oscar winner, etc., like the movies, it feels like those kinds of movies are made in much bigger, kind of stricter environments, and that wasn't the case at all. So yeah, it wasn't really a surprising aspect of the film. It was, in that sense, it was really comfortable. I mean, granted, it's challenging to make a movie always, and we were on the streets in New York, and there were some really cold days, etc. Yeah, we were on the beach on really windy days. Sometimes it was pretty brutal, but that's just how I am used to making films, and especially in New York. So everything felt quite comfortable and familiar.
On the post side, AI has been having an impact. Do you find yourself on set thinking any differently than you used to because those technologies are being used?
I personally don't. But I also feel like, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like AI in the audio cleanup space has been around for some time now. It's kind of the one area where, first of all, I think it's the area where it always made the most sense. But it's not something I consider. I mean, I'm still trying to get the best audio. In a perfect world, the audio I get can go into the film with, minimal work, because oftentimes the smaller the film, the less of a gap between the sound you deliver and the sound that gets put into the film, right? Because the budgets are smaller. The bigger the film gets, the more treatment the audio gets in post. So it's a funny paradox, but the more indie and scrappy a movie is, oftentimes the better job you have to do as a production sound mixer. So in my mind, you just have to do always the same job, which is to be extremely considerate of the audio and try to get it, as good as possible. And then if you're lucky and the movie ends up having a lot of money in post, it will get, even nicer later.
Do you know what dialogue is coming from set and what's been replaced afterwards?
Well done ADR, you can't tell, right? So you can never, yeah. I know that Shawn and many filmmakers who focus on realism strive to not have as little as possible or none at all ADR. But I don't know how much really gets deployed after the fact. And I do know that these days it's a lot easier to do this kind of stuff. I mean, you don't really necessarily have to get into the booth at a studio. You can really kind of do it in a quiet room and then send that audio off to post people to make sound, to match. And it's really about matching the performance more than anything. The ADR recording engineers might be really shaking their fists at the screen right now. But yeah, at the end of the day, I don't really know what's going on, unless it's really bad ADR, in which case I hope it's not. I hope it's not the case.
And what about continuity on set? This was a project you said was, a lot of times just cameraman, you and a script supervisor, and the director, obviously. When it's that small of a crew, does that become a responsibility kind of for everybody?
So, sometimes there's continuity errors. There often are in films. It's just not something we can 100% eliminate. But I personally think that this specific film is the kind of film where it's like such a crazy roller coaster ride that you really get swept up in it, and you wouldn't really catch anything watching it, at least the first time, unless you're really like sitting there to then later write in the IMDb goof section what the goofs are, then you're not really going to notice this kind of stuff. I don't know of any continuity errors that made it into the film.
You have any advice you'd like to share? Something that you wish you knew a few years ago that you've learned that you'd want to pass on to somebody else?
I feel like now we do live in a very democratized era in terms of the knowledge base and the equipment as well. I mean, the fact that this recorder is so affordable, and the fact that the knowledge base is all there, and we're out. The Location Sound subreddit is very active, and it's all there. I mean, you never, I don't know if this is just my anxiety, but I never feel like I quite have like all the answers. And I do wish there was like a real life person next to me who I could ask all this to. But at the end of the day, over the years, you end up figuring it out based on little bits of information. These days, don't hesitate to ask the questions as specifically or as directly as you want, because out there, there's some dedicated professionals who are out there just waiting to, to help people with questions they might have.
Well, Boris, this has been a fantastic conversation. We really appreciate you coming and sharing your knowledge and your obvious passion for what you do. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.